What if I told you that a philosophy developed over 2,000 years ago holds the exact blueprint for developing unbreakable mental resilience in our hyper-connected, anxiety-inducing modern world? That while we're scrolling through social media feeling overwhelmed by comparison and constant stimulation, ancient Roman emperors and Greek philosophers had already solved the puzzle of mental toughness? The modern world presents us with a peculiar paradox. We have more comfort, more safety, and more opportunities than any generation in human history. Yet we're experiencing unprecedented levels of anxiety, depression, and mental fragmentation. Our ancestors faced genuine life-or-death situations daily, yet seem to possess a psychological robustness that we've somehow lost in our climate-controlled, instant everything existence. This isn't nostalgia talking. It's a recognition that somewhere between conquering external challenges and creating unprecedented ease, we've forgotten how to build internal strength. We've become psychologically soft in ways that our great-grandparents would find bewildering. A delayed text message can ruin our day. A critical comment online can spiral us into hours of rumination. A work setback can feel like a personal catastrophe. But here's what's fascinating. The ancient Stoics anticipated this exact problem. They understood that external comfort doesn't automatically translate to internal resilience. In fact, they predicted that as life became easier, humans would need more intentional practices to maintain psychological strength. They developed what we might call the world's first systematic approach to mental toughness, and it's more relevant today than ever before. The Stoics had a concept they called the inner citadel, or inner fortress. Imagine your mind as a medieval castle. The outer walls represent your external circumstances, your job, your relationships, your possessions. These walls can be breached, damaged, or destroyed by forces beyond your control. But within that castle lies an inner keep, an unassailable core that no external force can touch unless you open the gates yourself. This inner fortress is your capacity to choose your response to any situation. It's your ability to maintain your values, your reasoning, and your sense of purpose regardless of what chaos erupts around you. The Stoics believed this was the only true source of security in an unpredictable world, and modern neuroscience is proving they were remarkably prescient. Consider Dr. Viktor Frankl, who survived the Nazi concentration camps not through physical strength or luck, but through what he later identified as the last of human freedoms, the ability to choose one's attitude in any given circumstances. Frankl wasn't a Stoic in the classical sense, but he had independently discovered the same psychological truth that Marcus Aurelius wrote about in his Meditations nearly 2,000 years earlier. The modern equivalent might be someone like Sarah Chen, a software engineer I know who was laid off during the 2023 tech downturn. While her colleagues spiraled into panic, updating their LinkedIn profiles frantically and catastrophizing about their futures, Sarah took a different approach. She recognized that losing her job was outside her control, but her response was entirely within it. Instead of spending energy on anxiety about things she couldn't change, she focused that energy on upgrading her skills, networking strategically, and maintaining her physical and mental health. What separated Sarah from her panicking colleagues wasn't optimism or denial. It was a philosophical understanding that her worth, her capabilities, and her future weren't determined by her current employment status. She had built what the Stoics would recognize as genuine mental toughness, not the brittle kind that depends on everything going according to plan, but the flexible kind that bends without breaking. The foundation of Stoic mental toughness rests on what Epictetus called the dichotomy of control. This isn't just a philosophical concept. It's a complete rewiring of how your brain processes stress and challenge. Epictetus, who knew something about adversity having been born a slave, divided all of existence into two categories: things that are up to us and things that are not up to us. What's up to us? Our judgments, our values, our responses, our efforts, our choices in each moment. What's not up to us? Other people's actions, natural disasters, market crashes, global pandemics, aging, and ultimately, death itself. This sounds simple, but implementing this distinction is where mental toughness is actually built. Modern psychology has validated this approach through what's called the locus of control. People with an internal locus of control who focus their energy on what they can influence rather than what they can't consistently show higher levels of resilience, lower levels of anxiety, and better performance under pressure. They've essentially adopted the Stoic operating system for their minds. But here's where most people get it wrong. They think mental toughness means suppressing emotions or pretending that bad things don't hurt. That's not Stoicism, that's emotional numbness. True Stoic mental toughness involves feeling everything fully, but not being controlled by those feelings. It's the difference between being a thermometer, which simply reacts to the temperature around it, and being a thermostat, which maintains its internal setting regardless of external conditions. When Marcus Aurelius lost his children, he grieved deeply. When Seneca faced exile, he felt the pain of separation from everything familiar. But neither man allowed their grief or pain to dictate their choices or compromise their principles. They felt their emotions as natural human responses, but didn't mistake those emotions for commands they had to obey. This philosophical stance creates what modern researchers call psychological flexibility. Instead of rigid rules about how you should feel or react, you develop the ability to respond appropriately to each situation based on your values rather than your impulses. You become emotionally intelligent rather than emotionally reactive. One of the most counterintuitive aspects of Stoic mental toughness is the practice of negative visualization, or premeditatio malorum. While our culture tells us to think positive and manifest good outcomes, the Stoics practiced regularly imagining loss, failure, and death. This wasn't pessimism or morbidity, it was psychological vaccination. Think of it like this. When you get a vaccine, you're exposed to a weakened version of a virus, so your immune system can build defenses before encountering the real threat. Negative visualization works similarly for your psychological immune system. By mentally rehearsing difficulties before they occur, you build emotional antibodies that make you more resilient when real challenges arise. Seneca would regularly imagine losing his wealth, his status, his health, not to torture himself, but to remind himself that his happiness didn't depend on these external things continuing unchanged forever. This practice had two profound effects. It made him genuinely grateful for what he currently had, and it prepared him psychologically for the inevitable changes that life would bring. Modern research on stress inoculation confirms the wisdom of this approach. Navy SEALs use similar techniques, mentally rehearsing mission failures and worst-case scenarios, not to create anxiety, but to reduce it. When you've already imagined and planned for difficult situations, you're less likely to panic when they actually occur. Consider the entrepreneur who practices imagining her startup failing, not to manifest failure, but to prepare psychologically for the statistical reality that most startups don't succeed. This mental preparation allows her to take calculated risks without being paralyzed by the possibility of failure, because she's already accepted that possibility and planned how she would respond with dignity and resilience. But here's the crucial distinction. Negative visualization isn't about expecting the worst or being pessimistic. It's about accepting uncertainty while maintaining agency. You acknowledge that you can't control outcomes, but you can control your preparation and response. This creates what Nassim Taleb calls anti-fragility, the ability to not just survive difficulties, but to actually grow stronger from them. When you've mentally rehearsed loss, you become less attached to things that are ultimately temporary anyway. This isn't about not caring. It's about caring in a way that doesn't make you fragile. You can love your job while accepting it might end. You can cherish relationships while understanding they might change. You can pursue goals passionately while holding them lightly. The Stoics identified desire as the source of most human suffering, but they didn't advocate for becoming desireless. Instead, they developed what Epictetus called the discipline of desire, which is essentially a philosophical framework for wanting things in a way that doesn't make you miserable. This discipline becomes crucial in our modern context of manufactured desire. We live in the first era in human history where entire industries exist solely to create wants we didn't know we had. Social media algorithms are designed to trigger comparison and inadequacy. Marketing departments employ neuroscientists to make products irresistible. Our desire mechanisms, which evolved to help us survive in scarcity, are now being exploited in an environment of abundance. The average person today sees more advertising in a day than someone in the 1950s saw in a year. We're constantly bombarded with messages that we need more, better, different things to be happy. The Stoics understood that chasing external goods as sources of happiness was like drinking salt water to quench thirst. The more you consume, the thirstier you become. But the Stoic approach isn't about becoming a minimalist monk or rejecting all material goods. It's about understanding the relationship between wanting and well-being. When you want something you don't have, you're essentially telling yourself that your current state is inadequate. You're placing your happiness hostage to circumstances beyond your control. The discipline of desire involves wanting what you have, appreciating what's already present in your life, and pursuing goals without making your peace of mind contingent on achieving them. This isn't settling or lowering your standards. It's raising your standards for what constitutes genuine success. Marcus Rodriguez, a marketing executive I encountered, exemplifies this principle beautifully. He earns a substantial income and enjoys material comforts, but he's not controlled by them. He drives a nice car because he enjoys it, not because he needs it to feel successful. He lives in a beautiful home because it brings him pleasure, not because he's trying to impress others. When the market downturn forced him to sell his house and downsize, he adapted without identity crisis or prolonged resentment. This is the practical application of Stoic mental toughness in a consumer culture. You engage with the material world without being enslaved by it. You can enjoy abundance when it's available and adapt gracefully when it's not. Your sense of self isn't tied to your possessions, your status symbols, or your ability to afford certain experiences. The Stoics called this preferred indifference. Health, wealth, and reputation are generally preferable to sickness, poverty, and shame, but they're ultimately indifferent to your capacity for wisdom, virtue, and genuine contentment. You can prefer them without needing them, pursue them without being controlled by them. Marcus Aurelius regularly practiced what scholars call the view from above, a mental exercise where he would imagine looking down at his problems from the perspective of cosmic time and space. From the vantage point of eternity, most of what seems monumentally important in daily life reveals itself to be relatively trivial. This isn't about minimizing genuine suffering or dismissing legitimate concerns. It's about developing philosophical perspective that prevents minor setbacks from feeling like major catastrophes. When you zoom out far enough, you realize that the presentation you're nervous about, the argument with your partner, or the delayed promotion won't matter much in 5 years, let alone 50. But perspective-taking works in both directions. The same cosmic view that shrinks your problems to manageable size also reveals the profound significance of how you choose to spend your brief time alive. If your life is just a blip in cosmic history, then how you conduct yourself during that blip becomes incredibly important precisely because it's all you have. This paradox of simultaneous insignificance and ultimate importance is central to Stoic mental toughness. Your daily frustrations don't matter much in the grand scheme, but your character development, your relationships, and your contribution to the world matter enormously because they're the only things that are truly yours. The view from above also reveals the interconnectedness of all human experience. Your struggles with anxiety, failure, and uncertainty aren't unique personal failings, they're part of the universal human condition. Seneca pointed out that everyone faces essentially the same challenges, just in different forms. This recognition builds both humility and compassion. When you realize that the successful entrepreneur also deals with fear, that the confident leader also experiences doubt, that everyone is essentially improvising their way through life with incomplete information, you stop taking your own struggles as evidence of personal inadequacy. You're not broken or uniquely challenged. You're human, facing human problems with human limitations. This perspective transforms how you relate to difficulty. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" you ask, "How can I use this experience to develop wisdom, resilience, and understanding?" Every challenge becomes raw material for character development, rather than evidence of cosmic unfairness. Understanding Stoic philosophy intellectually is different from implementing it practically in daily life. Mental toughness isn't built through reading about it. It's built through consistent practice of specific mental exercises that gradually rewire your default responses to stress and challenge. First, develop a morning philosophical practice. Before checking your phone or diving into daily responsibilities, spend 5 minutes asking yourself, what is within my control today and what is not? This simple question immediately centers your attention on your sphere of influence rather than your sphere of concern. Marcus Aurelius began each day by reminding himself that he would encounter difficult people, unexpected setbacks, and frustrating circumstances, not to create pessimism, but to prepare his mind for reality. You can do something similar by acknowledging that today will likely include some form of challenge, and that's perfectly normal rather than a sign that something is wrong. Second, practice the discipline of assent throughout the day. The Stoics understood that between stimulus and response lies a crucial moment of choice. When something happens to you, your first impression isn't necessarily accurate or helpful. You have the power to examine that first impression and choose whether to accept it or modify it. If someone cuts you off in traffic, your first impression might be, that person is an inconsiderate jerk who disrespected me. But you can examine this impression and choose a different interpretation. That person might be having an emergency, or they might not have seen me, or they might just be human and imperfect like everyone else. This isn't naive optimism. It's choosing interpretations that serve your peace of mind rather than feed your anger. Third, implement evening reflection as a regular practice. Seneca would review each day, examining his actions, thoughts, and responses. What went well? What could be improved? What did he learn about himself or others? This isn't self-criticism, but self-awareness, the foundation of all growth. Fourth, actively seek out controlled discomfort to build psychological resilience. Take cold showers, skip meals occasionally, walk instead of driving when possible, or sleep on the floor once in a while. The goal isn't to be unnecessarily harsh on yourself, but to prove that you can handle discomfort without losing your composure. This builds confidence in your ability to cope with whatever life presents. Finally, practice gratitude not as positive thinking, but as accurate thinking. You probably have access to clean water, safe shelter, adequate food, and basic health care. This puts you in the most privileged segment of humans who have ever lived. Recognizing this reality isn't about guilt or minimizing your problems. It's about maintaining accurate perspective on your actual circumstances rather than your imagined deprivations. Mental toughness in the Stoic sense isn't about becoming emotionally invulnerable or pretending that difficult things don't affect you. It's about developing the philosophical framework and practical skills to remain centered, purposeful, and dignified regardless of external circumstances. It's about becoming someone who can handle whatever life presents without compromising your values or losing your sense of self. The ancient Stoics faced plagues, wars, betrayals, and the collapse of civilizations. Yet they developed practices that allowed them not just to survive these challenges, but to find meaning, purpose, and even joy in the midst of uncertainty. Their insights remain relevant because the fundamental human challenges haven't changed, even if the external forms have evolved. In our modern context, Stoic mental toughness means being able to navigate social media without constant comparison, to face professional setbacks without identity crisis, to handle relationship difficulties without losing your dignity, and to deal with global uncertainty without paralyzing anxiety. It means becoming anti-fragile, someone who grows stronger through challenge rather than being broken by it. The blueprint is surprisingly simple. Focus on what you can control, accept what you cannot, develop perspective on temporary setbacks, practice grateful appreciation for what you have, and use every difficulty as an opportunity to strengthen your character. But simple doesn't mean easy. Like physical fitness, psychological resilience requires consistent practice over time. The question isn't whether you'll face challenges, setbacks, and losses. You will. The question is whether you'll face them with the wisdom, dignity, and inner strength that the Stoics demonstrated is possible for any human being willing to do the philosophical work required. Every moment presents you with a choice. Will you react from your immediate emotions and impulses, or will you respond from your deeper values and long-term wisdom? Will you allow external circumstances to determine your internal state, or will you maintain your inner fortress, regardless of what storms rage outside? The Stoics proved that this kind of mental toughness is achievable, practical, and profoundly liberating. Not because it makes life easier, but because it makes you stronger than whatever difficulties life might present. And in our modern world of manufactured anxiety and artificial urgency, this ancient wisdom might be exactly what we need to not just survive, but thrive. If you found value in exploring how ancient wisdom can build modern mental resilience, subscribe for more insights on blending timeless philosophy with contemporary challenges. And remember, mental toughness isn't about what happens to you. It's about who you choose to be in response to what happens to you.